Okay, so the next thing I want to do is complete a final exercise. And this is going to bring in a lot of the skills that we've learned in the past. Now, ideally, it'd be good if you could follow along with me and practice yourself. What we're going to do is we're going to create a white background econ shot. This is the most common photograph that every photographer is going to need to learn to do. Skills that you learn here are applicable across all imagery. So what do we need? We need a camera, a tripod, ideally some lights, a diffusion material, a white background or a wall, something to place the subject on, a subject to photograph, and then a computer to edit with, and we will need some photo editing software. I'm going to use Capture One so I can shoot tethered. Tethered is where you connect the camera to the computer. If you're doing professional product photography, it's basically a non-negotiable. You have to have this piece of software. Now, if you're just starting out and you don't want to invest, or you're not sure, or maybe you're just a small business, you can take the pictures on the camera and then upload them into your editing software. Most editing software has lots of the same tools, so you should be able to follow along. And then the final piece of software that you will need is Photoshop.
Okay, so welcome to my typically messy photography studio. First thing we're going to need is the white background roll. So if you just go ahead and pop that onto your support system, we'll then move forwards from there and just pop a table down. Now, you don't need the exact same setup as me. You can use any table or white wall for a background, but obviously I have these, so I shall use them. Now, if you are using a seamless roll, just make sure it's clipped down on all sides, so both corners and at the front, because we don't want it flicking up and getting in the way of the camera. Well, the next step is to get ready the product. Just give it a quick wipe. Make sure there's no dust on there, because dust will show up guaranteed in the photos and it's really difficult to remove. Now, I prefer to shoot my products on top of a base. This isn't necessary, but it's something that I prefer to do just because it gives me a little bit more height and lifts me off the top of the table. So just pop your product right in the center of the frame, and then we're just going to adjust the height of the camera. Now, what I like to do is level the camera off perfectly flat and make sure that the height of the camera ensures that there is a little bit of space between the product and the table. Now, this will enable us to drop a shadow onto the table, but still keep the camera relatively straight on. What we don't want is to be all the way down there because we won't see a shadow, or too high because the shadow will be too deep and we'll be looking slightly down on the product. Now, once I'm happy with the camera position relative to the product, I will then go ahead and pull in a light. So I have a light here on the left of frame. Let's just turn that on. Now, currently it's too far away for me. I'm just going to bring it in a little bit closer so that I can illuminate the front of the bottle better. As you can see now, I've just pulled it towards the front. So I'll just talk you through a little bit more about what I've done here. So I've pulled the light around to the front so that I'm happy with the illumination on the product. It covers enough of the label that there's still that shadow on that right side so that I've got a strong sense of the actual shape of it. Now, when I was around on the far left side, you couldn't actually see the label actually fully illuminated. So the next issue I've got here is I don't like that hot spot. So if you look just above the Vitamins Co logo, there's a bright light. Now, this is actually covering up some of the important information. So what I want to do is raise the light up high enough so that that bright highlight isn't falling where it is. So as I move the light up, you'll see that that highlight is starting to disappear and it's in a much more flattering position. Now that I'm happy, I lock the light off. Okay, so I'm just going to take my first frame. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the way that that looks. I like the lighting, but at the moment it's just a bit too bright. And I'd potentially like to actually soften up that light a little bit with a diffuser. So what I'll do is I'll just position a piece of diffusion material. And this is the diffuser I have here. And that's going to soften the light from the top as it falls onto the product. Now, as you can see, that shadow there on the right is much softer and the overall light on the product is much, much softer. And in this instance, this is closer to the direction I'd like to go for the product. Now, this is pretty straightforward and we're very nearly there. I'm just going to take one extra frame, and this frame is going to be a little bit darker. And that's because it's much better to underexpose than overexpose, because if we underexpose, we can recover. If we overexpose, we cannot recover the information in the editing software. And the final thing to do here in the studio is just to get a sample from our grey card and make sure that our colors are correct. Okay, welcome to Photoshop. So the first thing that I want to do here is just start off by actually cleaning up the product and finding any blemishes on the products that I want to fix. So the first tool I'm going to show you how to use is the spot healing brush. Now, the spot healing brush is great for just these tiny little dots that you'll find everywhere. Just tiny specks of dust. Hopefully, when we cleaned earlier on, will prevent too many of these issues from arising. So thankfully, this is something that we can do quite quickly. And then once we're happy with that, let's find something a little bit more difficult. So I want to remove this section here. Now, as you can see, it's done it, but it's a bit of a mess. So what I want to do instead is I'm just going to hit Control Z and undo. And I'm going to go to the stamp tool. So that's this one here. And the way that this stamp tool works, or the clone tool, is if I press Alt and left click, it's going to sample that area. And then I can paint the area that I've sampled somewhere else. So I've sampled over here. I can bring it over here, align that nicely. And I can just paint in a replacement. Now you do want to keep sampling just to make sure that everything lines up. Perfect. I've removed that relatively well. The next thing I want to do, once I'm happy with the retouching of the product itself, is remove the background. There's a number of ways you can do this. You can use the selection tool up here. The object selection tool enables you to draw around the products like this. And then you can simply hit this mask button bottom right. And we can add in a white background. So if I go here and solid color, and then rather than choosing a black one, I want a white background. Click on the layer here and pull that down. That looks pretty good, but you'll see actually if I come in here, it's not a perfect match. So what I'm going to do to get a more accurate one is hit Control Z. And again, and again, and again. So I'm back to where I started. And I'm going to choose the pen tool this time. So here's the pen tool on the right. I'm not going to show you exactly how to use this because it takes too long to learn, but I suggest that you look at it yourself because this is one of the most powerful tools in Photoshop. So I'm going to start off by drawing a path all around the object. I'm just going to speed that up. Okay, now that I've got that selection, what I'll do is I just go up here on the top bar and I'm going to press selection. And that's going to turn this path into a selection. Just going to check 0 here on the feather radius. And now we'll have a solid selection around the product. Now, this is a selection of the product itself and not of the background. So what I want to do is go into select, come down to inverse, and that will inverse the selection. And with this image selected and the selection of the background, you can hit this button here and that will create a layer mask. One of the final steps I want to do here is to crop the image. So making sure I've got a square crop, which I can select from up here. I'll go to crop here or press C and that'll give me the crop tool. And I'm just going to drag this in. So if I drag them all in on the product like this, on each side, I can guarantee that my selection is equally central. And then if I just click any of the handles and I hold down Alt or Option on Mac and just drag that out until it looks about right. So I'm going to use the sides of the product here as a reference with my lines of thirds. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to hit enter. Then the final thing to do is going in and adding that background. So down to the right here, allows us to add an adjustment layer or fill layer. Click on the top one, which is solid color. Drag this up right to the top left corner. So it says 255, 255, 255. And that will give us a perfectly white background. And then just drag that behind the product. And I'm going to save that. I'm going to open it up in Capture One. Okay, welcome to Capture One. So the first thing you'll notice is that the product itself looks a bit yellow, a bit muddy. So what I want to do is make sure that I've got the correct white balance. So I've actually already imported the white balance, the white balance image that we took earlier of the grey card. So I'll start off by just selecting adjustments over here on the top left, coming down to white balance and taking the eyedropper tool and hitting this here and clicking on any grey section. And that'll give me an accurate grey, an accurate white balance reading. And then I'll just quickly copy that, come into the product here and hit apply. Perfect white balance reading. And then the final things I want to do is I'm going to make a selection of the product itself. So if I just hit the subject button here, in this instance, it's going to make a very good selection of the product. And if I just want to check that, what I can do is I can press M, and that's going to show me the mask I've made a selection of. So I'll just uncheck that. And then I can make my adjustments. And this will make only adjustments to the product rather than to the product background. So the first thing I always do is play around with the midtones, and I'm just looking for a bit more contrast here. That's about good for me. And then the blacks, again, finding a bit more contrast. Now you're going to see it looks quite dark. So what I'm going to do is go to the whites here. You can go to the whites here, but I find it's not quite satisfying. Find more accuracy on the whites here. Now I don't want it to clip too much. I don't want it to be too bright, but that feels about right to me. And then I'm just going to add a little bit, take a bit out of the midtones actually, I think. Yeah, I don't think it actually needs too much contrast. That's about good. Yeah, that's looking very good at the moment. Now the next step for me is I want to increase the saturation just slightly and enhance the colors. So I'll drag that up until I'm happy. Now you can see there's a bit of yellow coming in here that I don't actually like. So what I'll do there is I'll come to my color options. So if I go down to color editor and I go into basic, I can see it's those yellow tones. And I'll just drag the saturation down. So if you drag it up, you can see it's there and there. Drag it down and it's gone. Now, if you're in a scenario where you this label was yellow, for example, you could select the label and then using some of the tools up here, and then just invert that selection and edit the rest of the product. Now, I'm nearly happy with this. I'm just going to add a little bit of punch. So just a touch of clarity, not too much. Too little. About there, and then a bit of structure. And just have a look at what it looked like before. Press up here. So this is before, this is after. Before, after. Much cleaner, very good. Commercial standard image, good to go. Well done.